Welcome back, 5th through 6th grade. We're going to jump right into our sniglet of the day. This word is folies. Folies. The first word I see that was mashed together to make this sniglet is the word faux. Faux is a French word that we have adopted into our English language, and AUX is pronounced O, and the word faux means fake. Fake. You can see the connection to fake too. Fake probably came from the word faux. And then you see the last part, lease. It rhymes with police, felice, or folies, police. The definition is a pedestrian car that resembles a police car and causes a traffic jam as everyone slows down to gauge the situation. Now, you guys aren't driving yet, so maybe you haven't experienced the feeling of thinking that a police car is approaching and wondering why it hadn't turned on its lights yet. But I have. I've certainly seen some of these. Normally, they're the kinds of cars that have bike rails or some sort of railing on top of it. So from a distance, it looks like a police car. But I thought that was a really funny sniglet. If you don't get it, read it to your parents and see if they think it's funny. All right, our Shakespeare quote. This is a very common one. This is "Break the Ice" from the play The Taming of the Shrew, which is a comedy by Shakespeare. In fact, this one is so common, we have the phrase or the word icebreaker. Have you ever heard of somebody saying, yeah, we're going to do an icebreaker to start off our meeting? And normally an icebreaker is like a little game or some sort of crowd mixer to get everybody to know each other. Break the ice has the idea now, it's become an idiom. It has the idea now that it's like maybe somebody doesn't know, a couple people don't know each other, and there might be a little bit of distance between them, a little bit of coldness or formality. And when you do something that's fun or funny, then they break the ice, and now things are warm and friendly between them. So that's the idea behind the phrase that we use now, breaking the ice or icebreaker. Instead of a Proverbs again, we're continuing with the James verses. This one is James 3:10. It says, out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing, my brethren. These things ought not be so. I think this is such an interesting verse because it's describing a reality that's just not good. Just because something is real and just because something is doesn't mean that it is good. And one of the realities is that out of our mouths come good things and bad things, blessings and cursings. So the reality is it's just true. We say encouraging, nice things. We also can be pretty mean. We can have both good intentions and bad intentions. I don't know anybody who says everything that comes out of their mouth is good and pleasant and wholesome. But he also states the other reality that this is just not good. It shouldn't be that way. Should not be that way for us, for those of us who are Christians. So I think this is just a good, it's good to acknowledge this is true. I think we need to never pretend like we're perfect, but also to strive towards making sure that what comes out of our mouth is only good, always good. That's a difficult goal. All right, let's jump into our lesson this week. So we're going to add a new rule to our writing rules. So get out your notes where you were keeping these rules. If you need a refresher, I'm going to jump up and just show you. It's why I had the other ones pulled up. So we started back a few weeks ago, starting on some writing rules that I told you to keep a notebook and keep a list. The first one I had you write down was avoid passive voice. The second one I had you write down was to avoid stand-alone be verbs and to avoid there is, there are sentences. And then we added a fourth one a couple weeks ago, we said avoid redundancy. Do you guys remember that one? I'm going to put a 4 by it so we remember. It was our 4th rule, avoid redundancy, and we talked about why. And then now we're going to talk about a new rule today, and I call this avoiding idioms. Now, some of you may not know what an idiom is. It is not an idiot. An idiom, these idioms are vivid phrases or expressions whose meaning over time has changed. Oh, look, I found an error. Did you guys catch that? My typo there has changed to something quite different from the original literal meaning. So I give you some examples because you might say, wait, what? That was a bunch of words. What does that mean? So normally it's something that you can imagine, you can see. It's very picturesque, very vivid. So the first example I have here is hit the hay. You can see the hay and you can see somebody hitting it. Now, we use that expression today, and it normally means to go to bed. We got to go, let's hit the hay. Let's go to bed. It doesn't mean what it says literally. We're not going to go find some hay and whack it. The picture in your mind of what it would mean literally is not what it actually means today. So that's what that definition means. Vivid phrases or expressions whose meaning over time has changed to something quite different from the original literal meaning. Another example is kick the bucket. So I'm going to highlight these as I read them. So kick the bucket, you might imagine in your mind walking up to a bucket and kicking it. But the meaning today means if we say, well, he kicked the bucket, that means he died. So where did these idioms come from? Why did we get something like this? Another funny one would be it's raining cats and dogs. There's all kinds of them when you start to look them up or think about them. So there's normally a story behind it. Hit the hay has to do with the fact that mattresses used to be made out of hay. I don't know when that started, what historical period it started and ended in. But I think we even brought that to the U.S. I do think it was even in medieval times that they made mattresses out of hay. But I'm sure in early American days that mattresses were often made out of hay. So I don't know how, universal that was. But over time in the American language, it came to mean, maybe even in the British language, it came to mean to hit the hay meant to go to bed, to go jump on your mattress made of hay. And so, I don't know, maybe they were fluffing it up before they climbed in bed, and that's why they had to hit it. Who knows? But now we no longer have mattresses made out of hay. We certainly don't have to fluff it up or rearrange it so it's cushy and not flat. But yet we often use the expression hit the hay. Kick the bucket has a little bit of a morbid story behind it. Has to do with someone who would stand on tie a rope around their neck, stand on a bucket, and kick the bucket out from under them, and thereby die. So it's not really it's a pretty sad story. It's a specific way to die. Now we use it in general to mean the person just died, not that they killed themselves. But each of these idioms normally has a background story. So why would we avoid them? Why do you think in formal writing? So let me clarify that most of the writing we're doing in this class is called academic or formal writing. There's very little casual writing. But how would you know what is casual and what's formal unless we learn about it? So one of the things that you can do to make your writing informal is to use idioms. For instance, think about it this way. If you were at a funeral for someone that you loved and someone said, what are you doing on Friday? Or you're getting ready to go to a funeral, and you wouldn't say, well, my dad kicked the bucket. That'd be pretty disrespectful and not at all formal. You would be much more reverent and sincere. So generally speaking, these kinds of phrases are informal. The other reason we would avoid them in formal writing is because depending on your audience, often the meaning can be confusing. When you use an idiom, you're assuming that everyone reading that paragraph or that paper understands your idiom. I know even from teaching this class that some idioms, some people don't know, whether it's they never heard it growing up. Sometimes they're limited to certain geographical areas, even generations. There are idioms that my parents used that I don't use. And there are idioms that my kids probably will never hear. So you have to be careful because you cannot assume that your audience knows what an idiom means. It also, another problem with using idioms in your writing is that it often exposes laziness, because sometimes we use idioms just out of habit instead of actually saying what we mean. So the best practice, the best way to keep your writing formal, academic, well written, is to say exactly what you mean. Avoid idioms. Now, certainly there would be times to appropriately use idioms. If you are writing something comical, if your audience was a small group of people and you were cleverly using idioms to tell a story tongue in cheek. Did you see what I did there? Tongue in cheek. Or maybe you are highlighting the idioms for some reason. So there are times where it would be appropriate, but in general, for formal writing, you must avoid idioms. However, you can't avoid them if you don't know what they are. So we're going to have 2 weeks on idioms. This week, we're going to do a fun project. I think they're both fun. But this week, what I want you to do is I want you to find 5 idioms. You can find books on idioms. I have a whole book on my shelf full of idioms. You can go to the library. You can Google lists of idioms. That would be up to your parents whether or not you can search the internet. And then I want you to write a short 1 or 2 sentence history. So the good thing about a book is the book I have, it gives the background of each of the idioms. If you go online, you can find websites that have collections of idioms and the story behind them. And so I want you to find 5 idioms and write 1 or 2 sentences for each one, giving me the history, the explanation. How did this idiom come to be? It's a fun word to say. And with 5, you could do 1 a day and easily get your homework done for next week. And parents, I would give them 5 points per idiom and 5 points per short history. So excuse me, that would be a 50-point project. Now, I think this is an easy, fun one. Just to help clarify, I thought of one point I didn't make back here. But one of the reasons, we talked already about our audience and how important it is to know your audience, to understand, okay, what is their education level? What is their language skill level? Are there going to be young readers, or maybe English as a second language readers? So you have to know your audience. I like to think of idioms, if I'm writing, I like to think of Amelia Bedelia. I lost where I was. Where'd it go? I like to think of Amelia Bedelia. I think, how would Amelia Bedelia read this? If I told her, go hit the hay, or if I asked her to go kick the bucket, how would she interpret this? And if you know that if Amelia Bedelia were to hear it, she would misunderstand it, then you know it should not be in your writing. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to go back to our homework and make sure you have a good time when you do this. And it really is fun to look these up. I think they'll stick with you forever. and then we'll do our next idiom assignment next week.